talk tonight. I want to talk about faith. I want to talk about courage. I want to talk about the idea of, and come at it from this point. We'll kick off here with this idea. It doesn't take courage to exist on the earth. We'll just start out that way. It doesn't take courage to exist. It takes courage to live our lives to the fullest. It takes courage to live our life in faith. It takes courage to trust God when you don't see that even He's in the picture with you. You trust that He's in the picture, but you don't see that He's in the picture. See, that's when it takes courage. But it doesn't take courage to exist. It doesn't take courage to get up in the morning. It doesn't take courage to go to work. It doesn't take courage to do a lot of stuff that we do on a regular basis. But, I just wonder how many people are actually living a life of courage, living out of that place of courage. Courage actually, by definition, says it means strength in the face of pain or grief. Strength in the face of pain or grief. It also means the ability to do something that frightens somebody, frightens one. And what's amazing is that courage is something we are all called to live in from time to time. Obviously, in the day we live in, we are called to live in a place of courage, a heart of courage, a mindset of courage. Even though some of us are going through grief, you've lost your job, you've lost, maybe some resource in your life or time or just however this thing is shaped up, we've all had a loss of some kind, right? I mean, I normally have X amount of hugs in a week, and I haven't had as many hugs. That's a loss, right? How many are with me, right? You're like, give me a hug, right? And so, but the idea is that God has called us to walk in courage, and there's certain points in our life where courage is more necessary than other times. There's certain points when courage is going to have to be this on purpose kind of deal. And in the Bible, it says it like this. When you look at when it talks about courage, it says, take courage. One of your translations will say that. Many of your translations will say, take courage. Do not fear, take courage. Do not fear, take courage. Take courage, take courage. In other words, it's not like something you're going to feel until you take it and walk in it and start seeing results. Then all of a sudden you feel courageous. But when you first start taking the steps, you're like, dear God, help me, because I'm pooping my pants right now. Right? I'm crapping my pants. It's not going well. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm taking courage, and I'm going to take the step that you asked me to take. It's really funny. I'm staring into these lights, and now I look at my notes, and all I can see is a yellow dot. I don't even know what I'm reading, but it's a good thing I, read them before. But courage is something you are not going to feel. But before I get into courage, I want to communicate some things regarding faith, because faith and courage go hand in hand. And I've talked about this several times over the years. I've talked about how faith sometimes has misconceptions. If you grew up in any kind of era where the faith movement was really strong, you can have a real interesting misconception that faith needs to be perfect, or faith needs to be like this guy's, or that person's over there, or this person's over there. But God hasn't called us to copy somebody else's faith, right? To copy somebody else's courage. Now, there's things that I can glean from other people that can help, mimic the steps or mimic the heart behind the courage. But God hasn't called me to have the courage of another pastor from another city. He's called me to have the courage of a pastor and a son of God in Port Huron, Michigan, where I'm at. You see what I'm saying? Because what happens is we can get into a place where we think faith is about arriving to a place of perfection, arriving to a place of having my act together. And what we do is we get into the misconceptions of faith, and I just want to give them a few to you. That first of all, faith is never meant to be perfect. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, it says it like this. Now, faith is the assurance. I'm reading from the Amplified Version because it's louder. All right? So now, faith is the assurance. Or in other words, the title deed or the confirmation of things hoped for. and the evidence of things not seen. And what happens is, it goes on to an interesting explanation. It says, faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by the physical senses. So faith comprehends it as fact before it actually sees it with a physical eye. That's what's so cool about when you live by faith. God can speak something to you, even as simple as, I got you in your area of finances, or I got you in your area of work, or I've got you in this area where somebody is dragging your name through the mud, or somebody's talking bad about you, or somebody's, dogging you out, or this happened or that happened. And God will say things like, I got you, just relax, just chill. And what happens is we get into a confident place of saying, okay, I'm going to live life today as if it already happened, as if that promise has already happened. I'm going to live in that peace. I'm going to live in that confidence. I'm going to live in that substance of faith, because even though it hasn't been made fact to the senses, my eyes, my ears, the touch, all those kind of things, I can't quite see it in the physical. In my heart's eye, I believe it to be true, because God has spoken it to me, because I've seen the miracle come to pass. Some of you are waiting on a health issue, or waiting on this, or waiting on that. Can I just encourage you today to take courage? Take courage. Live in that place of that faith, of that place where you hear God speaking it more than you do the fear speaking it. Oh, come on now. Chapter 11, verse 6 says, and without faith, it is impossible to please God. But because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and that he is a reward, he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Now listen, I really did. Back in the day, I used to put my faith in a place of like perfection, right? A place of I had to have it all together, or I had to have my act, just like his or just like hers. But now I'm beginning to realize, or I've realized a long time ago, but I'm realizing more and more that, man, I have an opportunity, such an opportunity right now to just live my faith. Live the faith that I have today and the strength that I have today in Him. And so in this place of courage, can I just give you a few things? When faith and courage do go hand in hand, but it's our responsibility. God's not going to come and empower and give you, drop a bunch of courage on you. God's going to give you direction. God's going to give you a word. God's going to give you a challenge. God's going to give you something to do. And at that point, that's when you have an opportunity to say, nope, ain't going to happen. Or is it going to be the point where you say, this is the point, I take on courage. I'm taking courage at the point that God speaks. And in Joshua chapter 1, there's a whole transition going on here. It's a beautiful transition because they thought Moses was the guy that was going to take them into the promised land. But obviously most of us know, if not all of us know, that Moses wasn't the guy, but Joshua was. So there's a big transition going on here where God is now declaring Joshua as the dude that's going to take the children of Israel into the promised land. In Joshua chapter 1, it says God's talking to Joshua, and he says, hey, Moses, my servant is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan into the land I'm about to give them. To the Israelites, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, and all the Hittite country. Now this is just the area that if you go back a little bit in the story, you'll find that God says there's 10 nations that you're going to go into this land, and there's 10 nations in that particular land, and we're gonna have to drive those people out of that place because that is your land. But it's funny that God says this. He says, and no one, in verse 5 it says, and no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. But yet, if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, it says 7 of these nations are actually more powerful than you are. So I want you to think about that for a moment. He says in Joshua chapter 1, He says, we're about to cross over. Joshua, you're the new leader. We're going into a new norm. Here's the new norm. Joshua, you're the leader. We're going into the new norm, the new place where I've designed for you guys, the promised land. And he says it like this. He says, and no one will be able to stand against you in the day, all the days of your life. But yet, 7 of the nations that you're going into are stronger and more powerful than you. Let me tell you, that is a time to take on some courage. That's a time where you're like, oh my gosh, for real, 7 of the 10 are stronger and more powerful than us. I find it funny that God's never moved by what might be the pushback of your calling. God's never moved by how much adversity you and I might go through. God's never moved at the amount of struggle that might be in the calling or in the place that we find ourselves in. He's never moved by that, because God always sees the end from the beginning. He didn't see them just going in, these children of Israel. He didn't see them going in and just, defeating Jericho and defeating the other nations. God saw them setting up shop, living there, creating generational blessing, living life to the fullest, living in a land flowing with milk and honey. You see, God was envisioning that more than he was the hardship to get to the fulfillment of the promise. And I tell you, there are so many times in my life, and so many times, and I know many of you can say the same thing, that there are so many times you've had to take up courage, that you've had to be on purpose. Come on, how many are out there with me? You've had to be on purpose, and you've had to take courage, and you've said, I don't feel it, I'm not seeing it, but yet I'm going to stay courageous in this moment because I know that there's a better fulfillment. I know that there's a greater place that God has called me to live. Some of you, God has called to make transitional changes in your family line. And you've done that. And you've taken courage, and you've heard that, you felt that in your heart, that you were going to make some changes in your life, that you're no longer going to live under debt, or no longer going to, have generational sins and generational issues flow through your bloodline. You said, enough's enough, I'm making changes. Come on, can I get an AO today? How many of you have made those changes? You said, and you're making those changes. It may not be the fullness yet, but you're making those changes. I just want to say I'm so proud of you, man. I know sometimes you go through some hardships and you go through that struggle and you feel like it's so overwhelming, like it's not ever going to happen. But I want to tell you today that it seems like when those children of Israel crossed over, the first group they had to face was Jericho. And their walls were super high. Their walls were super thick. The city was super long. And God knew already that victory was theirs. God knew it already that the victory was theirs. And I know he knows the same thing about you. That the victory is yours. That I'm going to see a victory. I'm going to see a victory. Come on, how many people out there can see a victory? How many people? I'm not even talking fully about the corona. I'm talking about our everyday lives. You know what? I don't fear this, but I think about this often. I think about what happened with Y2K. I think about what happened in 2008. I think about what happened with 9/11. And I think about all these things. And I don't think about the issue, the problem of it. I think about what happened on the other side. And that is, people went back to normal. They did. They went back to working. They went back to being busy. They went back to, being angry. Not everybody, you know what I'm saying, right? But society has a way of just going into, and even if it's a little bit different, we have an ability just to go back to normal. 5 months down the road, 10 months down the road, a few things still might be changed, but for the most part, we're going to be back to what is normal. And I started thinking about this even more, that unless we change on the inside, not a whole lot's going to change on the outside. Unless we change the heartbeat of, I'm going to take courage from my own life and do what God's asking me to do, then not a whole lot's going to change on the outside. Unless I change this hatred or this bitterness or this anger, I'm still going to, freak out on my kids when they don't do things right. I'm still going to flesh out when things don't happen at work, or I'm still going to walk in anxiety and fear levels, and it's still going to run my life. And unless things change, unless we have things change on the inside. You see, this is where it happens, man. It's at the core of us when we make these courageous decisions to say, instead of hate, I'm going to love. Instead of bitterness, I'm going to forgive. Instead of greed, I'm going to give. I'm going to be generous. And instead of, this attitude of entitlement, I'm going to be full of gratitude. And so unless these things change on the inside, when you look at the children of Israel and you read through the story when they came out of bondage in Egypt, nothing changed on the inside. Nothing. When Pharaoh chased them down and they were at the water, what did they do? They complained and they murmured and they griped and they went back to normalcy. When God provided this supernatural food, which was manna, what'd they do? They got sick of it. They got bored. It was exciting in the beginning. Man, shoot, you're waking up and you're going out and there's food on the ground. Come on, somebody. Right? Can you imagine going out and all of a sudden there's a bunch of 6-inch subs out there ready to eat, or some medium rare steaks every morning? I know it sounds silly, but that's what it was like for them. God provided manna. It actually meant, what is it? But they didn't change. And with miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, there wasn't much change. I tell you, God hit a rock and water came out of it. Or Moses did, right? But God provided water out of a rock. God turned bitter water into good water to drink, and people didn't change a whole lot. And so there were all these miracles, but who they were on the inside was still the same. I find that interesting, and I think about this even on the other side of the whole COVID-19. All this shutdown, all this locked in. If we come out on the other side of this, the same of who we are on the inside, has anything changed? Maybe we have. I hope. I pray. I pray we become people that are greater at trusting Him, greater at loving each other, great at forgiving, great at giving, great at serving, great at being Jesus and really being who the character of Jesus was on this earth. Because if things don't change on the inside, I can prophesy this, that after COVID-19 and all this stuff is done, we will go back to normalcy. I pray it doesn't happen. But these guys, man, God was trying to get them to a promised land. God was trying to get them to a land that He had promised. And man, He said, no one will be able to stand against you in the days of your life. Now listen, I've had God speak to me some things throughout the years, and He would speak to me like, okay, like when we had to move from Lapeer, which is our old building, which Landmark is now kicking butt over there, and they're doing great stuff. But I knew the day when I knew that we were going to have to move from there and go find another building. Man, I got to tell you, I was nervous, I was scared, I was fearful, I had all those feelings and all those thoughts. Where are we going to go? Oh my goodness. And I knew we had a time crunch to it. I'm so thankful. And God knew what we were going to be doing all along. But it was this thing of when He spoke it, I had to be on purpose. The staff and the leadership had to be on purpose. The church at that time had to be on purpose to take courage and to trust God with the next phase of this church. I don't know about you, but man, how many are thankful that He has provided? He's provided for both, what the building is used for now, the old building, and what our new building is used for now. So listen, there's moments when you're living life, and God will, all of a sudden you have something that God speaks in front of you. It could be starting a business, it could be writing that song, it could be writing that book, it could be calling somebody and trying to restore a relationship, and he said, no one will be able to stand against you, and you can hear God speak. And I've heard this, and he said, Mark, I'll provide all along. No one will be able to stand against you, the church, because I got your back. And he began to speak all these things to me. But yet we were the ones who had to take courage in the midst of that transition. Now in Joshua chapter 1, it's interesting that he says in verse 6, God says this to Joshua in verse 6, says, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. And then in verse 7, what does he say? Be strong and very courageous. And in verse 18, what does he say? Only be strong and and courageous. So I think God was trying to get to a point there. God was trying to remind him of something. Dude, you're going to go through some things. You're going to hit 10 particular groups of people. 7 of them are stronger and more powerful than you are. Ayo. 7 of them. How many of us would have been like, yeah, no problem, I got this, God? Or we would have been like, can you help me a little bit? I'm freaking out here a bit. See, we've all been in those situations. If you haven't, just follow Jesus long enough, and guess what? You'll have that experience where you have to be on purpose to take on courage. Now, there's something else I want to bring to your attention that I thought was pretty important for today. In Joshua chapter 3, verse 1 through 5, it says this. It says, in verse 3 we'll go to, early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan. Now listen, if you were camping at that place, it's time to get out. That's probably not the best title to be camping at. Where do you live? I live in Shittim. It's like, it's just not cool, right? And I was laughing at that because I know we all, think about what I just said. And you're like, did he really say that? I didn't say it. The Bible said that. That's what the name of it is. And but they were camping out there. And I find it funny that is the last place that they camped out before they got to the promised land. Now, I know in the Hebrew, it simply means just acacia tree and all that kind of stuff. But the name in our context, just in the context of where we live and how we know it, is like, man, I don't want to live there anymore. And it's funny that name was the last place that they camped before they went into the promised land. And doesn't it feel like sometimes before you get into breakthrough, you're actually going through crap seasons? Right? You're going through some rough patches, and it seems like all of a sudden you end up into a breakthrough season. All of a sudden you end up into a deliverance season. All of a sudden something happens, and that's what I love about our God, is that he is a suddenly kind of God. Can I get an amen, somebody? Amen. So then we jump ahead a little bit to verse 14, and it says, this is the point that they're about to cross over. This is what I want to show you guys some things, because this is pretty important stuff when it comes to courage. It says, yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. Now remember, they had to cross over the Jordan to get to the promised land. Now, this is at the point where they got to the water and they put their feet in the water. Now, what I want to bring to your attention is this, and I feel like this is very important for us to realize, is that at this point they were crossing over. It was the hardest, strongest flow of water that was going on. It was actually flood season because it was harvest season. And when it was harvest season in this day, the waters were running the strongest, the most fierce. And it was the scariest time, two crossed over, because a lot of people would have been swept away, especially the weaker ones, would have been swept away. We're talking millions of people would have been swept away in the current. But as soon as the people, the leadership, got into or touched the water at the strongest current, the water stopped and it backed up all the way to the city of Adam. And I think this speaks a lot to us people. I think this speaks a lot to our lives, is that many times we think God is going to line up this perfect scenario for our lives, and it's going to be just like we want it to be. And if all this works out just right and all that kind of stuff, I want to tell you today, there are times that God will ask you to move when it doesn't look like you should be moving. That God would ask you to cross over from death to life, or cross over from that bitterness to forgiveness, and cross over from that, whatever be the case, that God will ask you to move when the current is flowing the strongest. I want to think about this for a moment, because this is pretty interesting in our lives in the day we live in. That, you know what, when we have this mindset sometimes that when all this stuff gets in a row, then I know that it's God. And listen, that's not how it works. You look through the scriptures and you know what? You see a bunch of men and a bunch of women who took courage when God spoke, and they moved forward in the face of what was around them. Because courageous people, courageous faithers, we'll call it. Courageous faithers will move when God speaks. Courageous faithers will do it when Father speaks. Man, even you look in the New Testament, how many times did Jesus show up in a way that wasn't all hunky-dory? It wasn't all bells and whistles. He went in and healed somebody on the Sabbath. Why? Because he saw Father doing it, and he did it, and it was against the law to heal people on the Sabbath. So you got all these things that begin to happen in our lives. And when God begins to speak to us, I promise you it will not be in a season that looks like that even makes sense. He said in we're in Joshua chapter 3, and we're back to 16. The water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap and a great distance away at a town called Adam. And let's go to verse 16. The priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground. That's what I love about God. It may not look, please get this. It may not look like there's a path now. But as you take courage and you step out in faith, a path will appear. Please get this. They didn't walk across on muddy, sloppy, I can't really walk. The ground was dry. And it's almost like a slap in the face of circumstances. It's almost like a slap in the face of the things that you think might take you out. Job loss, financial loss, that husband or wife that cheated on you, and all those kind of things that are awful. And they're sometimes difficult to get through. We've had to navigate through some things ourselves over the years. But it's a slap in the face. It's almost like this. It's almost like when the priest stood in the middle of that river. I think that's a beautiful picture, man. They could have hurried up and got across, and everybody else could have hurried, and everybody's running and scared. Let's get over here before the water breaks. They said, no. We're going to stand right here. It says, stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground. While everybody else, all those millions of people, walked by and walked through to the promised land. I think that is a beautiful picture of our lives sometimes. The beautiful picture of us being able to put our back to the circumstantial things and just stand in your post and standing on dry ground and trust in the fact that what God spoke to you on this side of the Jordan will be the same thing He brings you to over here on the other side of the Jordan. I would have loved to have been there for this story, man. I would have loved to have seen this with my physical eye. I think that would have been such an awesome picture. So many things to get out of it. How many people were scared? Think about this. How many people were scared even still walking across, seeing that big wall of water? But man, when they saw the priest, come on, when they saw the priest, when they saw the people carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant was representative of the presence of God. Can I tell you today, every path that you are walking in, that you're like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I believe God has spoken this. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I believe God has told me to do this. I don't know how this is going to work out. Can I tell you today that the presence of heaven, yes, He's with you, but I want you to envision Him standing right there, man, in the center, back to the circumstantial issues, watching His people walk across. I think that is so amazing. I think it's so powerful that experience alone will help us be able to realize these people had to live it out. We read this stuff and we're encouraged by it, but man, now we're living our own life. And I want to encourage you today to take courage. Take courage. Take courage. Take courage. And keep taking courage. Man, don't stop. Keep taking courage. You say, well, Pastor, I've done this and I've done that. I've done this and I've done that. I want to tell you again, keep taking courage. Keep standing up in the face of what it looks like. Keep taking courage in building that business. Keep taking courage on writing that book. Keep taking courage on loving that person who's calling you out and dragging your name through the mud. Keep taking courage on pursuing your walk with Jesus. Keep taking courage on leaning into the heart of Father. Keep taking courage on learning and growing and asking the questions. Keep taking courage, because you never know what the fulfillment is on the other side of that. In Joshua chapter 3, verse 14, when they walked across, and that water was at flood stage. In fact, that's exactly what it says in verse 15. It says, now the Jordan is at flood stage during harvest. Isn't it interesting that flood stage and harvest went hand in hand in this land? I love the people of God. We're the people that get to harvest year-round. Not just financially. We sow year-round. We sow in love. We sow in peace. We sow in joy. We sow in financial. We sow. But we also get to harvest year-round as well. And here's the fun part of it. When we see those places that might be those circumstantial things in our lives that seem a little bigger problem than you want to address or want to have, can I tell you what courageous faithers do? Courageous faithers see obstacles as opportunities. Courageous faithers see obstacles as opportunities. Now you guys know, I mean, we've had projects at the church. We've had so many different things that we've had to do together as a church. And we could have looked at them as big obstacles, and we've had a few along the way. But man, opportunity. And you know, over the last 8 years, there was a particular person in our community that was coming against us at the church. And it was funny because I wanted to fight back, because if you know me, I don't mind instigating a little bit. And I wanted to do something one day, because what he was doing was making me look bad. Just to be honest with you, it was making our church look bad. And I wanted to do something. I didn't want to go out and start a big brawl in the back of the yard or anything like that. But I wanted to call him out. And I didn't do it because the Lord was speaking very strongly at that time. And I had to make a courageous decision in that moment. Some of you might think, yeah, but if you were really courageous, you would have went, you would have fought, and you would have proved yourself right. Yeah, but I would have lost the bigger picture. Please get this. The bigger picture is now that that person that was coming against us and the church, we're now friends with. Because there was a day that the Lord spoke to me very clearly, and that was, hey, I want you to restore your relationship with that guy. I want you to reach out to him. And so I did. I didn't want to in the beginning. At first I was like, get thee behind me some Satan. But I did not. I reached out, restored that relationship. What was so cool is that he was at the grand opening of Kid Zone back in June. And we've talked quite a bit over this time. And there's great support. There's great respect for both sides. I'm saying that because I wasn't perfect in it. I'm saying that because I could have looked at that obstacle and fought it and destroyed something that God wanted. And not every obstacle is the devil. Can I tell you that? Can we stop blaming the devil for everything? I think we give the devil way too much credit for the issues in our lives that we cause. Uh-oh. I know somebody's probably mad at me right now. Yeah, but Pastor, don't you know the devil made me do it? No, the devil didn't make you do it. He's not that powerful in your life. He only has power if you open the door up. I had a buddy of mine saying one time, he says, the devil is so weak, demons are so weak, they need you to open a door up for them. Now that'll speak to somebody. So, this story of this guy is one of those moments where it was like this obstacle that would seem so big and it was frustrating. I didn't like going through it and all that kind of stuff, but it became an opportunity. An opportunity for what? For me to be more Jesus to that guy. For me to love like at a level that I didn't want to love. For me to reach out and have grace and give grace at a level that I didn't want to give. And every one of us are faced with this from time to time because things happen in our lives that are just not fun. But courageous faithers see obstacles as opportunities. Courageous faithers, I just want to give you a couple things real quick. Got you that one. See obstacles as opportunities. The second one is courageous faither will be willing to blaze new trails. Blaze new trails in every area of your life. The areas when God speaks. Could you imagine being Joshua? Because I've been in second in charge at a church and different places. Being second in charge is so much different than being in charge. I'll tell you that right now. You poop a lot more being in charge than what you do as a second guy. You really do. And there's a lot of responsibility being a second guy. It was a lot. But man, being in charge is a completely different mindset. And I don't understand it to the fullest, but I understand Joshua here when God says, hey Joshua, Moses is dead. Now it's time to take up the reins and move forward. And we've all experienced that at some level where God now begins to speak directly to us, right? Begins to speak to us about now's the time to take it and move the ball forward. And listen, that's not the time to retreat. That's not the time to back up. That's not the time to stop. That's not the time to run the other way. That is the time to take courage and take the next step forward. It takes courage to wait on God for the promise. It takes courage to move forward while waiting on God. Think about that for a moment. It takes courage to move forward while you're waiting on God to bring the promise alive. It takes courage to move forward and continue to move forward when all the provision's not there. It takes courage to move forward when it's not all sunny skies. It takes courage Let me just close with this thought. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the ability to move forward in the face of it. Courage is not the absence of fear. I can imagine when that water was flowing and the current was super strong and it was at flood time at harvest and the priest had to step into the water. God never promised that the water was going to part. He never promised that. They didn't see that come to pass until they put their foot in the water. So can I ask you this today? Are you putting your foot in the water? And you know what that means figuratively, right? You know it means to take that step when it looks scary. Take that step when you're wondering if it's going to take you out because the current's strong and it just doesn't feel right. It just, if everything was lined up, it makes sense, but God doesn't work that way. The last thing I want to leave you with regarding courage for all the courageous faithers out there is that courage recognizes fear but refuses its power. Courage recognizes fear but refuses its power. I want to speak to a few people today. I want to speak to those who are starting businesses. And maybe your business has been hurt a little bit, right, because of the corona. I want to encourage you just to continue to go. What God spoke to you yesteryear or yestermonth about your business, He's still speaking about it in the future. This is just a hiccup. I want to encourage you, those that are thinking about writing a book or writing a song or whatever you're doing, do it. Stay courageous in that. I want to encourage those, the single moms, the single dads, and you're doing it. You're working 2 jobs and providing for your kids and providing for your family. And it is a struggle. My mom was a single mom with 5 of us. And man, 5 of us kids growing up, my family is like having 10. And so if my mom can do it, you can do it. If you can do it, you're going to help other people to do it. But just stay courageous. Stay doing what you're doing. Stay providing. Stay leading. Stay loving. For those of you that are in this season that you're going through and you're like, I know what God has spoken, but I just don't know. I want to encourage you to get up and do it. Let today be that day. Tomorrow be that tomorrow. Get up. Take that step. Take that step, take that step, take that step, take that step. There was a lot of people. We're talking millions of people, the children of Israel that were hanging out with Joshua. That Joshua had to lead into that promised land. Millions of people. Imagine how many of them on the front side of the river, of the Jordan, before they crossed over, before they saw the water split, were fearful. They were scared. They were full of anxiety. They were full of fear. They were full of doubt. I bet you many of them were full of doubt. Many of them were angry. Many of them had an entitlement issue. Many of them had problems that we face today. But if it wasn't for the priest who obeyed, come on now, if it wasn't for the leaders that got in the water and put their foot in the water, all those people would have not experienced that breakthrough. Think about what they were feeling on the other side of the water. Think about what they were feeling on the other side. Before they saw Jericho, and they just had that breakthrough of walking through water. Now think about this with you. Every step you take, yeah, woo, that's a great song. Anyway, every move you make. But anyway, when they got to the other side of the water, that feeling of, there's always that group, right? That is like, yeah, I knew it all along that God was going to do that. I knew we were going to be okay. And the other group is looking at them like, would you shut up? No, you were, nervous just like we were, but there's always those people. Oh, I knew it all along, no big deal. But I want you to think about today the breakthrough that you bring for your people. as you step out for your kids, for yourself, for the next generations. And may we continue to be people of courage. I'm calling out all the courageous faithers to take courage, take the step, do what it is that God is asking you to do. Now in this moment, if you're overwhelmed and you say, I need courage, I need a shot in the arm with courage, I'm going to ask you to post on here. I'm asking you to just, put something on here so the people, our prayer team and our pastors can get a hold of you and they can be like, praying with you. But if you need courage today, would you post on here, I need it. I need courage. I need courage. I need courage. And we're going to pray for you. We're going to pray with you. Now, I'm going to tell you today, it's not all fun in the beginning, but man, it's so rewarding on the other side. So church, when we pray together, can we just connect in this moment and ask Father to do what it is that He wants to do in our lives? Come on, let's pray together. Father, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you so much, God, that you're so patient with us. God, you're so patient. But yet you lead us in such an awesome, fatherly way. I just pray for every person that's listening, Father. I pray, God, that those who need courage to do what it is you're asking them to do, that they'd be able to really sink their teeth into this and take courage and take that step forward. One step is not the full picture, and many times, God, you're not asking us to do the full picture. You're asking us to take the next step. So, God, we're going to take the next step, and we're going to take it in courage. We're going to step out in faith, and we're going to be courageous faithers for you. And so, Father, I pray a blessing over every person listening. I'm praying a blessing, God, over every family, every husband who really maybe are questioning, how am I going to provide? How is this going to happen? Father, I pray in the name of Jesus that courage would arise in every husband, every man, every woman. Courage would come alive. God, we thank you that your promises are alive and they're well and they're still for us. So we bless you today. We honor you today. And we're going to thank you today as if the promise has already come. Because faith makes a fact in our hearts, even though it hasn't become real to the senses yet. We're going to live with that fact that what the substance of what we're hoping for and have faith for, we're going to trust you. We're going to lean into you. We're going to continue to listen and take that step. So, Father, we bless you. And I bless these guys today in Jesus' name. And everybody in your house said, amen. Church, I'm going to ask you just to worship with us just for a little bit longer. Love you so much. Can't wait to see you again. Can't wait to hug you. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll be having some information. And we will see you soon. Love you.